You are standing in the skincare aisle of your CVS at 9 at night, phone flashlight on because the lighting in there is criminal, and you are holding 2 tubs of moisturizer. One cost you $89 at Sephora. One costs $14, 3 feet away, under fluorescent lights, next to the foot cream and the cotton balls. And some small suspicious part of you is starting to wonder if you've been had. You have. Sometimes, not always, and that's actually the more interesting story. I have spent my entire career inside this industry, in labs, in ingredient meetings, in rooms where grown adults argue for 40 minutes about whether a jar should be matte or glossy. And I can tell you plainly, some of what dermatologists actually put on their own faces and recommend to their own patients is sitting right now in a plastic bin at your Walgreens, marked down next to the reading glasses. Not a dupe, not a knockoff, the real thing at a fraction of the theater. I'm going to walk you through 8 of them, building to the top of this list, where something happens that I think will genuinely surprise you. The top 2 products on this list, the ones dermatologists reach for most, are made by the exact same parent company. And it is almost certainly not the company you'd guess. Hold on to that thread. It pays off. But first, one idea, because I want you to carry it through every single item we talk about today. Here it is. A product earns its place on a dermatologist's shelf when the active ingredient sits high enough on the label and at a concentration strong enough to actually do something to your skin, not just enough to legally claim it on the box. That's the whole test, not the jar, not the price, not the little French script on the label pretending to be older than it is. Concentration and correct formulation. In Korea, this is simply how we're taught to read a product from the very first day in the industry. You don't ask what a cream promises you. You ask what's actually written on the ingredient deck, in what order, and whether the company behind it respects you enough to make that deck honest. That habit will serve you in a CVS aisle in Ohio exactly as well as it serves you in a pharmacy in Seoul. So let's climb. Number 8 is Differin Gel, the little orange box with adipalene 0.1% in it, sitting quietly in the acne aisle like it's nothing special. Here's why it deserves to be on a list about dermatologist secrets. Adapalene used to require a prescription. In 2016, the FDA approved switching it to over-the-counter status, which almost never happens with a retinoid. It's one of the very few times regulators looked at a prescription strength active and said, this is safe enough for the general public to use unsupervised. Dermatologists have been quietly telling patients who can't afford prescription tretinoin to just buy this instead for years, because chemically, it is doing real retinoid work, smoothing texture, unclogging pores, softening fine lines over time, for around $13. It's made by Galderma. Remember that name. It comes back. Number 7 is Vanicream, moisturizing cream. And if you've never heard of it, that's sort of the point. It doesn't advertise because it doesn't need to. Vanicream is made by a company called Pharmaceutical Specialties Incorporated, a small, independently held manufacturer out of Rockford, Illinois. And it has stayed independent while almost everything else on shelves nearby has been bought and rebranded. Dermatologists send patients with eczema, rosacea, and post-procedure skin straight to this jar because the ingredient list is almost aggressively boring. No fragrance, no dye, no common irritants, nothing there to react to. In a category obsessed with adding things, Vanicream's entire reputation was built on what it leaves out. That's a genuinely different philosophy from most of what surrounds it on the shelf. And it's one Korean minimalist routines have leaned on for years. Fewer ingredients, each one earning its place, rather than a long story told in Latin on the back of the box. Number 6 is Aquaphor Healing Ointment, that thick, almost stubborn paste in the blue and white tube that looks like it hasn't updated its packaging since your mother's medicine cabinet. It hasn't much. And that's because it doesn't need to. Aquaphor is an occlusive. It seals moisture in rather than adding fragrant actives, and dermatologists recommend it constantly for healing after procedures, for cracked hands, for babies, for anyone whose skin barrier needs to just be left alone and protected while it repairs itself. It's made by Beiersdorf, the German company, and Beiersdorf owns something else on this list, one slot up. Number 5 is Eucerin Advanced Repair Cream. And there's your sibling, same parent company, Beiersdorf, sitting one aisle over from Aquaphor in most stores, doing a related but distinct job. Where Aquaphor seals, Eucerin's advanced repair line is built around urea and ceramides working together to actually restore the skin's own barrier lipids over time, which is why it's a frequent recommendation for chronic dry skin and mild eczema that needs ongoing maintenance rather than a one-time seal. Two products, same corporate parent, doing genuinely different jobs well, which tells you something important. Ownership by a large company isn't automatically a red flag. Sometimes it just means stable manufacturing and a research budget behind a formula that already worked. Number 4 is Cetaphil Gentle Skin Cleanser, in that unglamorous white bottle that has been sitting on drugstore shelves since 1947, which makes it genuinely older than almost every luxury brand pretending to have heritage. It's a low-foaming, low-pH cleanser. And I want you to sit with that phrase for a second, because low pH cleansing is one of the foundational ideas Korean skincare exported to the rest of the world. The understanding that stripping your skin's natural acidity with a high pH, heavily foaming soap actually damages the barrier you're trying to protect. Cetaphil got there on its own, decades earlier, through pharmacology rather than philosophy. And dermatologists have recommended it that entire time for exactly that reason. Here's the ownership twist though. Cetaphil is now owned by Galderma, the same company that makes Differin, back at number 8. Two products, wildly different jobs, one shared corporate roof. Number 3 is Neutrogena Hydro Boost, the gel cream in the blue tub that feels more like a serum than a moisturizer when you touch it. Dermatologists like it for oily and combination skin, specifically because it's built around hyaluronic acid at a texture and concentration that actually hydrates without sitting heavy or triggering breakouts, a genuine gap in a market that assumes moisturizer has to mean rich. Neutrogena is owned by Kenvue, the consumer health company that Johnson & Johnson spun off into its own public entity in 2023. So this isn't some scrappy indie brand hiding in plain sight. It's backed by one of the largest consumer health operations in the world, which is exactly why the formula is this consistent, batch after batch, year after year. Now we're at the top 2. I told you at the beginning something would surprise you here. And this is it. Number 2 is La Roche-Posay Toleriane Double Repair Moisturizer. It has that French pharmacy aura, thermal spring water on the label, that clinical blue and white packaging that photographs like it belongs in an apothecary in Paris. And there is real substance under the aura. It combines ceramides and niacinamide in a formulation specifically designed for sensitive, reactive, or post-procedure skin. And it shows up constantly on dermatologists' own personal shelves, not just their recommendation lists. But La Roche-Posay has been owned by L'Oréal since the 1980s. That French pharmacy feeling you're responding to is a beauty conglomerate's packaging decision, not an accident of history. And number one, the one I promised you at the very start, is CeraVe Moisturizing Cream. That plain tub with a honeycomb pattern that somehow became a genuine cultural phenomenon a few years ago, endorsed by dermatologists on camera before it ever went viral on its own. CeraVe was built around three specific ceramides and something called MVE delivery technology, which releases those ceramides and humectants gradually over the course of the day, rather than all at once. A real patentable formulation choice, not marketing language. And here's your payoff. CeraVe is owned by L'Oreal, has been since 2017 when L'Oreal bought the parent company for roughly $1.5 billion. The same company that owns La Roche-Posay, sitting one slot below it. Your top two dermatologist picks, made by the same conglomerate, sold at wildly different price points, with wildly different packaging stories, doing genuinely overlapping barrier repair work. Your face has never once read a price tag. It doesn't know if the jar cost $14 or $90. It only ever responds to what's actually in the formula, at what concentration, delivered how consistently. That's it. That's the whole secret this list has been circling. So, how do you actually use any of this the next time you're standing in that aisle? Keep it simple. First, learn to read past the front of the label to the actual ingredient deck, the way this whole industry trained Korean consumers to do decades ago. Look for where the active sits in the list, not just whether it's mentioned somewhere in paragraph 3 of the marketing copy. Second, stop assuming price and efficacy move together, because as you just heard, they very often don't. A $14 tub and an $89 jar can share a parent company and a delivery technology. Third, when you're layering multiple products, a cleanser, a treatment, a moisturizer, go thin to thick, the way you'd build a routine here. Patting products in rather than dragging them across your face, since rubbing creates friction your skin doesn't need, and patting lets thinner layers absorb before the next one goes on. And fourth, give any new active ingredient, adapalene especially, a real trial period on a small patch of skin before you commit your whole face to it, because dermatologists recommended describes the ingredient's track record, not your individual skin's reaction to it. Now, a few honest notes, because I'd rather you hear these from me than get burned by them later. Drugstore inventory rotates constantly and varies by region. What your CVS stocks in Ohio may not be exactly what a Walgreens in Arizona has on the shelf that same week. So treat this list as a map of what to look for and ask your pharmacist about, not a guaranteed treasure hunt. Adapalene and other actives can cause real dryness and sun sensitivity when you first introduce them. So start slow, and please don't let anything on this list make you complacent about sunscreen. A good moisturizer repairs your barrier, but it is not doing sun protection's job, and that's a separate step. You still need every single morning, non-negotiable, and corporate ownership on its own is neither a badge of honor nor a scarlet letter. A big parent company can mean stable, well-funded manufacturing, or it can mean quiet cost-cutting on a beloved formula. The only way to know which is happening is to keep checking the ingredient list yourself every so often, rather than trusting the box to stay the same forever. Which brings me to the bigger thing I actually want you to leave with. It would be easy to walk away from this thinking the moral is big companies bad, indie brands good. And I want to gently take that away from you, because it isn't true and it isn't useful. Bunny Cream stayed independent, and that's part of its integrity. But CeraVe and La Roche-Posay are both owned by the same giant conglomerate, and they are still, by a wide margin, two of the most respected barrier repair formulas dermatologists recommend. Being owned by a giant was never the actual danger. Neglect is the danger. A company quietly reformulating a beloved product to shave pennies off a batch while the packaging stays exactly the same, counting on you never rechecking the label. That's the only thing worth watching for. Not who owns the company, whether they're still respecting the formula they built their reputation on. Your face has never once read a price tag. It only ever wanted the formula. Everything else, the glass, the French script, the $89, that was always the theater, sold to you separately and priced accordingly. Tell me in the comments which one of these you've been quietly buying without knowing the story behind it, and which one you're finally ready to stop overpaying for on the department store side of the aisle. If this kind of unglamorous, follow the ownership trail digging is useful to you, stay close, subscribe, because next time I'm pulling apart the sunscreen aisle the same way, and what I found there surprised even me. I'll see you in the next one.